Proton has rolled out collaborative document editing in their Drive. Big tech platforms are changing their privacy policies to allow for AI training with user data. Discord is experimenting with end-to-end encrypted calls, but only calls. Welcome to Surveillance Report 185, where we are dedicated to keeping you private and secure with the latest news from the past week. I'm Nathan from The New Oil.
And I'm Henry from Techlore.
Last week's video went slightly viral. We have a ton of new subscribers, so welcome and thank you for being with us. If you are interested in helping to support this podcast and keep it consistent and keep it free for everyone, we have several ways to do that. We have a Patreon, where for $5 a month or more, you get to be part of our weekly Q&A. For $10 a month or more, you get an expanded version of this podcast with no promo segment. It's also a little bit longer with more of our thoughts and opinions and stuff like that. And actually, quick note for those listening, the Surveillance Report Clips channel, we use the Patreon version to make those clips. So if you're kind of on the fence and you want to get like a sample of what that might be like, go ahead and check that out and see what you think. For those who want something recurring but don't want to use Patreon, we do have LibrePay. And of course, we always support Monero, which is the most private and anonymous way to support us. So thank you guys. We're happy to have you with us.
Shout out to, I don't know, I see some of the big people who sent us Monero. Someone on the 20th of June sent us 0.1 XMR. So thank you to that person. And there's a lot of other little tips throughout the month, but that was the biggest one from the last month.
And with all the administrative details out of the way, we're now going to jump into the highlight story. And this week we are talking about Proton Drive introducing collaborative document editing. Pretty big news. I know I've been waiting on that for a while, but let me start by quoting the article. Docs in Proton Drive are built on the same privacy and security principles as all of our services, starting with end-to-end encryption. Docs lets you collaborate in real time, leave comments, add photos, and store your files securely. Best of all, it's private. Even keystrokes and cursor movements are encrypted. We are rolling out Docs starting today, and the feature will be available to all users over the next couple of days. So by the time you're hearing this, if you're a Proton user, should be available. Sounds like even for free users, which is great. At that time, if you go to drive.proton.me and click on New in the top left, you will see the ability to create a new document. You can share and invite other users. I'm assuming they have to be Proton users, but I didn't test that. You can set it to edit or view permissions, just like Google Docs or any of those other ones. You can view cursor indicators. So if there's two people in the document or more, you can see who's where, what they're editing. You can leave comments and replies, and you can even import and export documents like docx, .txt, .md, and .html. I don't really have a lot of thoughts on this one other than, like I said, I think this is a really cool feature that I've definitely been waiting for ever since Proton Drive launched. It's kind of obvious Proton is trying to be like a Google replacement or an Apple replacement and kind of have that suite. And I think this is another huge step forward that brings them up to that level where it has that same feature parity.
I definitely think it's a good step in the right direction. I guess one question I have is I wonder how much of this had to do with standard notes. For people who haven't been following the podcast too long, Proton recently acquired Standard Notes, which is an end-to-end encrypted open source document collaboration platform. So I wonder if this was all their work. I don't know, and I don't have any details behind the scenes on how they developed this.
I'm going to have to say no, because unless something changed when I was a Standard Notes user, it wasn't collaborative. That was actually one of the things that bugged me about it.
Got it. Well, I still wonder if like the actual ability to type documents and I don't know. It'd be cool to get some insight into that just for my own curiosity. It's pretty bare bones. So like on the good side, again, it's nice that they're starting to roll this out. This is something that we've wanted. It's why in Techlore we never even considered Proton Drive. One of the many reasons actually. But this is at least one issue dealt with. But it doesn't deal with everything. It's still only docs. There's no spreadsheets or anything like that or PowerPoint. So it's still limited to docs. But I think that's people's main use case. And it looks like it has comments. I mean, I'm just checking it out right now. It doesn't really specify if it's only for Proton users, but I have a hard time believing it's not just Proton users. I can type any email here, but I assume they have to use Proton. It seems good, and it's a step in the right direction, and I'm glad to see it. I guess my question is, when will we see support for this on maybe like devices, like native devices? Like, can you, if someone has an iPad or a tablet, an Android tablet, will they be able to do this? Those are kind of my next questions, as always, for Proton stuff.
This actually, we had a short talk, me and Henry, the other day about if we wanted to switch over to Proton Drive and try that for our workflow with surveillance report. I think we kind of unofficially settled on not doing that, but that's how far it's come. It's like this could actually be something we could use, at least for our purposes. So it is pretty cool to see that. Because yeah, I'm with you. When it first rolled out, there was no desktop client, no editing. It's just like, well, I like this, but it's kind of not really useful. And now it's like, we actually had that conversation like, this could be useful.
Right. It's not off the table for me. I think the actual document collaboration is more than good enough for what we do for our notes for this podcast. The main issue, I think, is just holistically when like the whole workflow, it's hard to justify it still.
Good news. Like I said, they're trying to be a Google Suite replacement, and I think this is another big step. That's my key takeaway.
All right, so now we have the data breaches, and we're going to start with a fintech company called Wise, which says that some customers were affected by the Evolve Bank data breach. They shared U.S. customers' personal data with Evolve, and that's information that may have included things like names, addresses, date of births, contact details, and social security numbers, or employer identification numbers, I assume if you're a business. For non-US customers, Wise also shared another identity document number. It's unclear how many Wise customers have been affected, as the company wrote that it's still actively investigating.
Yeah, we're going to have several Evolve data breaches this week. The next one says Affirm says cardholders were impacted, and this is a buy now, pay later firm. And as part of the findings, there's evidence that data includes names, social security numbers, bank account numbers, and contact information. That's kind of all we know about that one so far.
There's a third Evolve Bank data breach from Yield Street. This is an investment platform, and they declined to say exactly what information was stolen, nor how many customers were affected. But given the information that was leaked in the other two data breaches we shared, I would be concerned if you were a Yield Street customer.
Health Equity data breach exposes protected health information. Health Equity is a healthcare fintech firm. It looks like this was one of those cases where it wasn't really them. It was like a third-party vendor that somehow led back to them. There's really not a lot of information on this one. The accessed information included some personally identifiable information, which in some cases is considered protected health information pertaining to certain members. That's literally it. Very vague.
An Ethereum mailing list breach exposes 35,000 to a crypto draining attack. So they compromised Ethereum's mailing list provider and sent over 35,000 addresses a phishing email with a link to a malicious site running a crypto drainer. And that's really all we have so far on this one.
All right, Roll20, which is an online tabletop role-playing game platform, discloses data breach. Roll20, for those who don't know, it's like it lets you play like D&D and games like that, but remotely with multiple people. You can build maps and have your little characters and hit a button and it rolls the dice for you. The attacker modified one user account, and this is from Roll20. We promptly reversed those modifications. During this time, the attacker was able to access and view all user accounts. That's kind of as much as they said in terms of how many people were impacted. So the article notes that Roll20 says on their website, they have 12 million users, and it's the #1 choice for D&D online. So again, according to Roll20, the attacker may have been able to view users' personal information, including full name, email address, last known IP address, and last 4 digits of their credit card if the user had stored a payment method. The company added that the attacker did not have access to passwords or full payment information such as home address or full credit card numbers.
Formula One governing body discloses a data breach after email hacks. They haven't disclosed when this was detected, or how many people's individual and personal information was accessed, or what data was exposed. So they didn't actually say anything. So we can't really say anything either.
India's Airtel dismisses data breach reports amid customer concerns. So for those who don't know, Airtel is a telecom giant which has amassed nearly 375 million subscribers in India, and they have dismissed media reports about the alleged breach as, quote, nothing short of a desperate attempt to tarnish Airtel's reputation by vested interests, unquote. A purported data broker emerged on a known cybercrime forum this week, offering the sale of the alleged personal information of approximately 375 million users, including phone numbers, email addresses, Aadhaar identification numbers, and residential addresses.
Prudential Financial now says 2.5 million impacted by data breach. So this is a Fortune 500 company, which I mentioned because maybe not everyone has heard of them. I haven't. But they've revealed in a filing with the Maine Attorney General that it notified over 36,000 people whose personal information was stolen during the breach, and it's included some pretty personal information. But last week, the company actually updated the number regarding the February data breach. So this was a long time ago, and it says the incident actually impacted 2.5 million people.
We're going to move into companies. The headline says Google, Snap, Meta, and many others are quietly changing their privacy policies to allow for AI training. They had a nice little summary at the top that I think said it really well. AI data has become a treasured resource for companies as they seek to train new models. With many publicly available sources rapidly running dry, firms are turning to private data sets protected by privacy laws. To give themselves cover, these companies are inserting small changes into their privacy statements to allow them to use the data in this way. So it is worth noting the FTC said, quote, "It may be unfair or deceptive for a company to adopt more permissive data practices, for example, to start sharing consumers' data with third parties or using that data for AI training, and to only inform consumers of this change through a surreptitious, retroactive amendment to its terms of service or privacy policy." According to the article, this is exactly what's happening. Google is just one example. Last July, it made several key tweaks to its privacy policy. It now states that Google uses publicly available information to help train its language AI models and develop products like Google Translate, Bard, which is now Gemini, and cloud AI capabilities. Last month, Adobe undertook a similar action and faced customer backlash over the changes. In May, Meta informed its Facebook and Instagram users in Europe that it would use publicly available posts to train its AI, and it remains to be seen what actions the commission will take as more privacy policies are changed to incorporate AI data training.
Google's testing facial recognition technology for campus security, starting at site near Seattle. These are interior security cameras that have been collecting facial data and comparing it to images stored from employee badge images, which includes the extended workforce, to help determine if there are unauthorized people on the premises. People entering the building will not be able to opt out of the screening, but the document says the data is strictly for immediate use and not stored, and that employees can opt out of having their ID images stored by filling out a form. Google has experienced at least one notable violent incident in the past, where in 2018 a woman opened fire at YouTube's office in San Bruno, California, injuring 3 people.
YouTube now lets you request removal of AI-generated content that simulates your face or voice. Instead of requesting the content be taken down for being misleading, like a deepfake, YouTube wants the affected parties to request the content's removal directly as a privacy violation. According to YouTube's recently updated help documentation on the topic, it requires first-party claims outside of a handful of exceptions, like when the affected individual is a minor, doesn't have access to a computer, is deceased, or other such exceptions. Simply submitting the request for a takedown doesn't necessarily mean the content will be removed, however. YouTube cautions that it will make its own judgment about the complaint based on a variety of factors. For instance, it may consider if the content is disclosed as being synthetic or made with AI, whether it uniquely identifies a person, and whether the content could be considered parody, satire, or something else of value and in the public's interest. The company additionally notes that it may consider whether the AI content features a public figure or other well-known individual, and whether or not it shows them engaging in, quote, sensitive behavior, like criminal activity, violence, or endorsing a product or political candidate.
Microsoft has told more customers that their emails have been stolen, and we're going to focus on the headline story here because this is a recap. So we've been aware for some time that the digital Russian break-in at the Windows maker saw Kremlin spies make off with source code, executive emails, and sensitive US government data. And reports last week revealed that the issue is even larger than initially believed, and additional customers' data has been stolen. Bloomberg reported that emails being sent to affected Microsoft customers include a link to a secure environment where customers can visit a site to review messages Microsoft identified as having been compromised. But even that might not be the most security-conscious way to notify folks, and several thought they were actually being phished in the process of this notification. So
Twilio says hackers identified cell phone numbers of two-factor app Authy users. But apparently last week, Twilio was hacked, and somebody claims to have stolen 33 million phone numbers. On Tuesday, Twilio confirmed that the threat actors were able to identify the phone numbers of people who use Authy. This is a separate incident from when this happened previously. No, what was it? Authy was hacked and they identified Signal users, something to that effect. A Twilio spokesperson told TechCrunch that the company has detected the threat actors were able to identify data associated with the Authy accounts due to an unauthenticated endpoint. We have taken action to secure this endpoint and no longer allow unauthenticated requests. And allegedly, I said this is a different attack, but apparently it's the same group. And that was all the way back in 2022, so man, how time flies.
Amazon has discontinued Astro for Business Robot Security Guard to focus on Astro Home Robot. This is a small story. This was our highlight story way back in the day for one of the old surveillance supports, the whole Astro robot. I don't know if people remember that one, but these are essentially little Amazon robots that walk around and they protect you somehow. But Amazon informed customers and employees Wednesday morning that it plans to discontinue this program less than a year after launching the robot security guard for small and medium-sized businesses. The decision will help the company focus instead on the home version of Astro. They'll stop working on September 25th. Amazon's solution to this is they encourage these users to recycle the devices. Aside from the users recycling them, businesses will receive full refunds for the original cost, plus a $300 credit to help support a replacement solution. They will also receive refunds for unused prepaid Astro Secure subscription fees. Amazon hasn't made any role reductions as a result of the decision to discontinue Astro for Business, noting that impacted employees will shift their focus to consumer robotics products for the home. The company declined to say how many customers are impacted by the decision.
This next story is really quick. It comes from Discord. Well, it comes from a YouTube video and was shared in the Techlore forums. It says Discord voice and video end-to-end encryption is hitting the experimental phase. So again, this was a video from a channel called No Text to Speech. It's a pretty good video. It's pretty short. I think it's less than 10 minutes. I definitely recommend checking it out. This only seems to apply to calls, voice and video calls, not messages. And the video actually points out that Discord has specifically stated they will never end-to-end encrypt messages because they want to be able to, bend the knee anytime law enforcement requests anything. It's also not very user-friendly, according to the video, so...
All right, well, now we're going to dive into the research, and we're going to start with a new snail load attack exploits network latency to spy on users' web activities. These are researchers from the Graz University of Technology, and this is a side channel attack known as snail load that can be used to remotely infer a person's web activity. So a defining characteristic of the approach is that it obviates the need for carrying out an adversary in the middle, aka I'm assuming man-in-the-middle attack, or being in physical proximity to the Wi-Fi connection to sniff network traffic. This entails tricking a target into loading a harmless asset, like a file, an image, or an ad from a threat actor-controlled server, which exploits the victim's network latency as a side channel to determine online activities on the victim's system. To perform such a fingerprinting attack and glean what video or website a user might be watching or visiting, the attacker conducts a series of latency measurements of the victim's network connection as the content is being downloaded from the server while they are browsing or viewing. It then involves a post-processing phase that employs a convolutional neural network trained with traces from an identical network setup to make the inference with an accuracy of up to 98% for videos and 63% for websites. In other words, due to the network bottleneck on the victim side, the adversary can deduce the transmitted amount of data by measuring packet round-trip time. And this is unique per video and can be used to classify the video watched by the victim if they really wanted to try to find that information. This doesn't require JavaScript, no form of code execution on the victim system, and no user interaction, but only a constant exchange of network packets. That's all they need. There are patches for this vulnerability that are being readied by the OpenWRT community, as well as router vendors like 360, Huawei, Linksys, Mercury, TP-Link, Ubiquiti, and Xiaomi. So
we only had the one research story, so now we're going to jump into politics. Meta's pay or consent model fails EU competition rules, the Commission finds. So back in March, the EU opened a formal DMA investigation into Meta's pay or consent offer, following months of lobbying from privacy advocacy and consumer protection groups. For those who don't know, basically it was a premium offering. Basically, you could pay to get rid of ads, like a monthly subscription, or you can see targeted ads. The EU Commission has apparently decided this is not okay. This violates the DMA. The Commission wrote in a press release that the binary choice Meta offers forces users to consent to the combination of their personal data and fails to provide them a less personalized but equivalent version of Meta's social networks. Failure to abide by the regulation, which applied on Meta and other so-called gatekeepers since March 7th, could be extremely costly for the ad tech giant. Penalties for confirmed breaches can reach up to 10% of global annual turnover and even 20% for repeat offenses. More saliently, Meta could finally be forced to abandon a business model that demands users agree to surveillance advertising as the entry quote-unquote price for using its social networks.
So the next story was definitely really interesting and ties into kind of the web app stuff that I was covering more on Techlore not too long ago. But Apple has bowed to Kremlin pressure to remove leading VPNs from the Russian App Store. So essentially, Russia put pressure on Apple to remove certain VPN providers, including Proton, Redshield, Nord, and Le VPN. Now they are removed from the App Store. So users in Russia who already have those VPNs can still use them, but they will no longer be able to update them And people who don't have these VPNs yet can no longer install them.
This next story is really quick. Brazil's data regulator has banned Meta from mining data to train AI models, like we were just talking about earlier. The headline really says it all.
Spain has introduced a porn passport to stop kids from watching smut. So this is officially called a digital wallet beta, and the app Madrid unveiled on Monday would allow internet platforms to check whether a prospective smut watcher is over 18. These viewers will be asked to use the app to verify their age, and once verified, they'll receive 30 credits with a 1-month validity, granting them access to adult content. Enthusiasts will be able to request extra credits. While the tool has been criticized for its complexity, the government says the credit-based model is more privacy-friendly, ensuring that users' online activities are not easily traceable. The system will be available by the end of the summer. It will be voluntary, as online platforms can rely on other age verification methods to screen out inappropriate viewers. It heralds an EU law going into force in October of 2027, which will require websites to stop minors from accessing smut. Eventually, Madrid's passport is likely to be replaced by the EU's very own digital identity system, which is eIDAS2. And this is also a so-called wallet app allowing people to access public and private services across the whole bloc.
And our last political story comes from Detroit, where the police department has agreed to new rules around facial recognition tech. So this comes as part of a lawsuit where Detroit has repeatedly arrested black people based on the facial recognition software says it was them. As part of the settlement, the Detroit Police Department has agreed to new guardrails limiting how it can use the technology. These new policies prohibit police from arresting people based solely on the results of a facial recognition search or on the results of photo lineups conducted immediately after a facial recognition search. It also states that photo lineups cannot be conducted solely on the basis of facial recognition. Instead, there must be additional evidence linking a suspect to a crime. The policies, which can be enforced by a court for the next 4 years, also require police training around the risks and dangers of facial recognition tech and an audit of all cases since 2017 where it was used to obtain an arrest warrant. Cities including San Francisco have banned the use of facial recognition by law enforcement. Microsoft also recently banned police departments from using its AI tech for facial recognition.
We don't formally have FOSS news this week, free and open source. I guess just a loose one if people are following. I haven't seen any formal articles written about this, but I'm seeing a lot of stuff about Signal on like Twitter, of all places, or X, whatever the hell it's called this week. But pretty much there's some like stuff going around about Signal storing images and stuff like that unencrypted locally on the device, which people are not happy about and is probably overall not a good thing. So just keep that on your radar. I have heard overall the advice being shared for a long time now that for people who really want maximum security out of Signal to only use it on mobile and not on desktop. So I think that advice has not changed in light of this. So seems like concerns with desktop Signal, and if people are interested in that, we'll keep eyes on that and probably have something more formal next week once there's more news about it.
And that'll take us into the Misfits, where we only have one final story. AI trains on kids' photos even when parents use strict privacy settings. So last month, there was a Human Rights Watch researcher named, I'm going to very much mess this name up and I apologize, Hyejung Han, Hyejunghan, found 170 photos of Brazilian children that were linked in Leon 5B, which is a popular AI dataset built from common crawl snapshots of the public web. Now she has released a second report flagging 190 photos of children from all of Australia's states and territories, including Indigenous children who may be particularly vulnerable to harms. These photos are linked in the dataset without the knowledge or consent of the children or their families. They span the entirety of childhood, making it possible for AI image generators to generate realistic deepfakes of Australian children. Perhaps even more concerning, the URLs in the dataset sometimes reveal identifying information about the children, including their names and locations where photos were shot, making it easy to track down children whose images might not otherwise be discoverable online. From a single link to one photo that showed two boys, ages 3 and 4, grinning from ear to ear as they hold paintbrushes in front of a colorful mural, Han could trace both children's full names and ages, and the name of the preschool they attended in Perth. Perhaps most disturbingly, information about these children does not appear to exist anywhere else on the internet, suggesting that families were particularly cautious in shielding these boys' identities online. Stricter privacy settings were used in another image that Han found linked in the dataset. The photo showed a close-up of two boys making funny faces, captured from a video posted on YouTube of teenagers celebrating during the week of their final exams. Whoever posted that YouTube video adjusted privacy settings so that it would be unlisted and would not appear in searches. Only someone with a link to the video was supposed to have access, but that didn't stop Common Crawl from archiving the image, nor did YouTube policies prohibiting AI scraping or harvesting of identifying information. That was all our news for this week. So again, Proton has rolled out collaborative document editing, a big step forward for challenging some of the other big tech suites out there. Speaking of big tech, they are changing their privacy policies to allow for AI training with user data, so keep that in mind. You could try deleting some of that older data if you want. May not work, maybe they hold on to it. We don't know, but it's better than doing nothing, I guess. And Discord is experimenting with end-to-end calls. Forgot to mention on that one, they're still holding on to the metadata. So, keep that in mind too. They may not have the content, but sometimes the metadata is more than enough. If you guys would like to support the podcast, we have Patreon for $5 a month. You get to be part of our midweek Q&A. For $10 a month or more, you get a longer version of this podcast with no sponsor segments, some more analysis, some more thoughts. If you're not a fan of Patreon, but you want a convenient recurring way to support us that doesn't have perks, or you don't mind if it doesn't have perks, we have LibrePay. And of course, we have Monero. We don't see anything about you, but we do see those contributions, and we thank you very, very much for your support. As always, if money is tight right now, totally get it. You can still support us by leaving a comment, sharing the podcast around, especially sharing the podcast around. That helps so much, subscribing, liking, all that fun stuff. So thank you guys for listening. Links to all of our stories can be found in the show notes. If you have a story that you think we should cover, please send it to news@surveillancereport.tech. Give us a rating if that's an option. We're trying to reach as many people as possible with privacy, and you can help us do that. So thank you guys again, and we'll see you next week.